$182 billion in taxpayer exposure, 79.9% of the company seized by the federal government, 36 hours after refusing to save Lehman Brothers, the largest corporate rescue in American history. Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson, New York Fed President Timothy Geithner, Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke, the same three men who, the night before, had told Wall Street the era of bailouts was over. On the 16th of September 2008, the Federal Reserve announced an $85 billion emergency credit line to AIG, the largest insurance company in the world. By the time the rescue was complete, the figure would more than double. One man in an office park in Wilton, Connecticut, had sold $500 billion of insurance against bonds he insisted could never default. Then a phone call came from a building on Pine Street. Inside that building, the chief executive of a 90-year-old insurance company that had survived 2 world wars and the Great Depression was telling Tim Geithner that AIG would be insolvent by Wednesday morning. The market discipline argument had a useful life of approximately 36 hours. To understand what was rescued that afternoon, you have to understand what American International Group had been. It was the largest insurance company in the world. In 1919, a 27-year-old Californian named Cornelius van der Star arrived in Shanghai and opened a 2-room insurance agency on Nanking Road. He was the first Westerner to sell insurance to the Chinese. Over the next 3 decades, Star built an Asian empire spanning Hong Kong, the Philippines, and Japan. When the communists took Shanghai in 1949, his Chinese operations were nationalized overnight. He started again from New York. In 1960, Star hired a 35-year-old Korean War veteran named Maurice Raymond Greenberg, known to everyone as Hank. 8 years later, Greenberg was chief executive. He would hold the title for 38 years. Under Greenberg, AIG grew into the largest publicly traded insurance corporation on Earth, operations in 130 countries. A market capitalization at its 2000 peak of $239 billion. A company older than the radio. And on the morning of the 16th of September 2008, it was hours from collapse. The man who would lose AIG was the last man who should have lost it. By 2005, Hank Greenberg had no chief executive role to lose. Greenberg was born in New York in 1925, landed at Normandy in 1944, and was recalled to Korea in 1950 as a captain in the Rangers. He joined AIG in 1960 and never worked anywhere else. For 38 years, Greenberg ran AIG with absolute authority, brilliant, ruthless, and personally feared by every senior officer in the company. In February 2005, New York Attorney General Eliot Spitzer opened an investigation into a $500 million sham reinsurance transaction between AIG and a Berkshire Hathaway subsidiary designed to inflate AIG's loss reserves. Under pressure from the board and a threatened indictment, Greenberg was forced to resign on the 14th of March 2005. He was 79. He had been CEO for 37 years. AIG restated 5 years of earnings. The criminal case was dropped. The civil case settled in 2017 for $9 million and no admission of fraud. What mattered in March of 2005 was that the only man at AIG who had ever fully understood the risks the company was running had been removed from the building. The bomb in Wilton, Connecticut, no longer had a babysitter. 377 people in an office park most New Yorkers had never heard of were generating 15% of AIG's profits. By selling insurance, they had set aside $0 to pay. The unit was called AIG Financial Products. It was founded in 1987 by Howard Sosin, who convinced Greenberg that AIG's pristine AAA credit rating could be monetized by writing derivatives the major banks themselves could not. Sosin negotiated an unusual structure. AIGFP would book the full present value of multi-decade contracts as income at the moment they were signed. Sosin left in 1993. In 1998, AIGFP passed to a 43-year-old Brooklyn College graduate named Joseph Cassano. Cassano had no advanced degree in finance. He had begun his career in a back office. Under Cassano, AIGFP doubled, then tripled. By 2005, it had offices in Wilton, London, Paris, Tokyo, and Hong Kong. Cassano personally drew approximately $315 million in compensation between 2002 and 2008. The product that produced those profits was the credit default swap. In its simplest form, AIGFP would, for a small annual premium, insure a bond against default. If the bond paid, AIGFP kept the premium. If the bond defaulted, AIGFP paid par value. Because AIG carried a AAA rating, AIGFP did not have to post collateral at signing. The premiums flowed in. No reserves were set aside. Cassano referred to the business more than once as free money. By 2007, AIG Financial Products had insured $500 billion of bonds against default. $200 billion of that was tied to American subprime mortgages. The decision that destroyed AIG was made between 2003 and 2005, when Cassano and his lieutenants decided the safest, most profitable use of AIG's balance sheet was to write credit default swaps on the senior tranches of mortgage-backed CDOs. The product was, in Cassano's analysis, almost mathematically risk-free. A super senior tranche sat at the top of a payment waterfall. For it to take losses, every junior tranche beneath had to be wiped out first. Cassano's models indicated a 99.85% probability of zero losses. Between 2003 and 2005, AIGFP wrote protection on roughly $527 billion of bonds. The largest category was American subprime mortgages. The buyers were not the holders of the bonds. They were the investment banks that had created and sold them. By the peak, Goldman Sachs alone held roughly $20 billion in protection from AIGFP. Société Générale, Deutsche Bank, and Barclays were the other principal counterparties. All five firms would later be paid 100 cents on the dollar by the Federal Reserve. Inside Goldman, the protection was bought not to hedge, but to monetize an aggressive short. Goldman was betting the bonds would default. AIG was the other side. By the end of 2007, AIGFP held $527 billion of CDS exposure on a balance sheet supporting roughly $95 billion of equity, 5.5 to 1. By July 2007, Joseph Cassano was being asked for the first time in 9 years to post collateral he had spent a career insisting AIG would never have to post. The contracts contained a provision almost nobody outside AIGFP had focused on. If the market value of the insured bonds fell, or if AIG's credit rating was downgraded, AIGFP would have to post cash collateral. The calls could come at any time. They could be enormous, and the cash had to be available immediately. On the 27th of July 2007, Goldman Sachs sent AIGFP its first collateral demand. The amount was $1.8 billion. Cassano refused to pay in full, disputing Goldman's valuation. The dispute would not be resolved until the Fed intervened. Through the autumn of 2007 and into the spring of 2008, the calls escalated. The European banks, Société Générale and Deutsche Bank, demanded billions, then Merrill Lynch. Every demand was disputed. Every dispute consumed more cash. By February 2008, the auditors at PricewaterhouseCoopers refused to sign off on AIG's internal controls without disclosing a material weakness in AIGFP's super senior CDS portfolio. On the 28th of February, AIG announced a fourth quarter loss of $5.2 billion, the first quarterly loss in the company's history. Cassano was relieved of his role that same day. He was retained as a consultant for $1 million a month for 9 months to help unwind the portfolio he had built. The portfolio was by then beyond unwinding. While Wall Street spent the weekend of the 13th of September trying to save Lehman Brothers, the chief executive of AIG was 4 blocks away, asking the New York Fed for help no one was listening for. AIG's CEO in September 2008 was Robert Willemstad, a former Citigroup president named to the role in June. On Friday the 12th, with AIG's stock down 60% in 3 days, Willemstad walked from 70 Pine Street to 33 Liberty Street and asked Timothy Geithner for a Federal Reserve loan. Geithner was, at that hour, attempting to broker the sale of Lehman to Bank of America or Barclays. Lehman took priority. AIG would have to find a private sector solution. Willemstad returned to Pine Street and called J.P. Morgan and Goldman Sachs, asking for a syndicated $75 billion private credit line. Both examined the books over the weekend. By Sunday evening, both had walked. What had been disclosed to neither bank, what AIG itself did not yet fully understand, was that AIGFP's collateral obligations were about to multiply. On Monday the 15th, with Lehman in Chapter 11 and the market in freefall, Standard & Poor's downgraded AIG by 3 notches. Moody's followed within hours. The downgrade triggered a contractual provision in the AIGFP CDS contracts. An additional $20 billion of collateral was now due. By close of business Tuesday, AIG had at that moment total liquid assets of approximately $20 billion. The calls due Tuesday afternoon exceeded 50. At 9 o'clock Monday evening, Willemstad placed a second call to Geithner. Paulson and Bernanke joined the line. Willemstad informed them AIG would file for bankruptcy on Wednesday morning unless the Federal Reserve provided emergency liquidity. A bankruptcy of AIG would cascade through every major bank on Wall Street. All parties understood it would happen within 48 hours. At 4 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon, 36 hours after refusing $29 billion for Lehman, the Federal Reserve announced $85 billion to save AIG. The terms were punitive, 850 basis points over LIBOR, roughly 12%. The Fed took warrants for 79.9% of AIG's equity. Willemstad was replaced by Edward Liddy, retired CEO of Allstate, who agreed to run AIG for $1 a year. Over the next 12 weeks, the credit line proved insufficient. A second tranche of $38 billion was added in October, then $40 billion of TARP equity in November. 2 special-purpose vehicles, Maiden Lane 2 and Maiden Lane 3, were created to absorb the toxic assets directly. Total taxpayer exposure peaked at $182 billion. The money did not stay at AIG. Maiden Lane 3 was designed to extinguish AIGFP's credit default swap contracts by paying counterparties. In cash, at par, on bonds the market was pricing at 50 cents on the dollar. Goldman Sachs received $12.9 billion, Societe Generale $11.9, Deutsche Bank $11.8, Barclays $8.5, Merrill Lynch $6.8. None took a haircut, none negotiated. In March 2009, AIG paid $165 million in retention bonuses to the AIGFP staff who had built the portfolio that destroyed the company. Some employees received death threats. A rally outside the Wilton office, organized in part by an emerging movement that would call itself the Tea Party, drew hundreds. Within a year, that movement would reshape American politics. The bailout of AIG was not, in the end, a story about one autocratic unit head in denial, though Joseph Cassano was certainly that. It was a story about the choice the U.S. government made the day after Lehman. Market discipline lasted 36 hours. By December 2012, AIG had repaid every dollar. The Treasury netted approximately $22 billion in profit. Cassano was never charged. The Justice Department closed its investigation in 2010. He retains the bulk of his $315 million. Hank Greenberg, age 101 as of this recording, sued the U.S. Treasury in 2011 and won a declaratory judgment in 2015 that the bailout terms were an illegal taking under the Fifth Amendment. He was awarded $0 in damages. Next time on Empires of Money, $700 billion. 9 banks. 1 room. The Treasury Secretary, who said he'd never bail out Wall Street, wrote the largest check in American history and made the CEOs sign before they left. TARP, October 2008.